The rain poured down in relentless sheets as James Langley drove through the winding, narrow roads that led to a small, forgotten town. A place called Ashbrook. He was a private detective, seasoned and sharp, with a reputation for uncovering truths hidden in the shadows. But this case had him uneasy from the start. A man named William Carter had gone on a killing spree in Ashbrook. He'd slaughtered 5 people in a series of gruesome, violent attacks. What made it all the more bizarre, though, was the reason Carter gave for his actions. He claimed he had been possessed by a demon, and that the bloodshed was part of some ancient, ritualistic prophecy. The police had dismissed it as the ramblings of a deranged man, but Langley, with his knack for finding the truth, had been hired by a journalist to investigate the case further. He had arrived at Ashbrook late in the evening, his car headlights cutting through the fog that seemed to cling to the town like a living thing. The streets were empty, silent, save for the distant crash of thunder. The houses were small, run down, and the lights were dim, casting eerie shadows along the cracked sidewalks. Langley didn't know what he expected, but it certainly wasn't the oppressive atmosphere of fear and decay that greeted him. He walked into the town's only diner, the smell of stale coffee and burnt grease hanging heavy in the air. The woman behind the counter didn't look at him, her hands moving mechanically as she wiped down the counter. Her face was pale, gaunt, like she hadn't seen the sun in years. He sat down at a corner booth, unpacking his notebook and scanning the room. He noticed a small group of locals huddled together near the window, casting furtive glances toward him, whispering to each other. There was a tension in the air, something unspoken, that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He took out a photo of Carter from his briefcase, unremarkable in appearance, just another face in a crowd, but with those vacant, wild eyes that had been burned into the headlines. The photo had been taken right after the killings, when Carter had been dragged into custody, covered in blood, his face twisted in agony as he babbled about demons and hellish fires. Langley had been tasked with uncovering the truth, whatever that truth might be. But the longer he stayed in Ashbrook, the less certain he became of what that truth was. He spent the next few days combing through the town, speaking to the few locals who would speak to him, gathering fragments of stories about Carter's life. No one knew much, but the rumors were all the same. He had been a quiet man, a factory worker, living with his wife in a small house on the outskirts of town. But one night, he'd snapped. The madness seemed to come out of nowhere. He'd been normal one moment, then violent, frantic the next. Langley's investigation led him to the old church on the edge of town, a place that was barely standing anymore. Its walls were crumbling, the windows boarded up, but there was something about it that felt off. Langley stood outside for a long while, staring at the faded sign above the door, half obscured by vines, St. Thomas Parish. The church was locked, but the door had been broken open at some point in the past. Inside, dust and decay filled the air. The pews were rotted, the altar long since stripped of its religious symbols. But what drew Langley's eye was the large, circular stain on the floor. At first glance, it looked like an old oil spill, but as he stepped closer, the air grew colder, and he saw something more disturbing: scratches, carvings, symbols that had been etched into the stone in a crude, desperate manner. It was as if someone, or something, had been trying to dig into the earth itself. Langley knelt down, his flashlight illuminating the symbols. They were strange, jagged, almost otherworldly. And the closer he looked, the more unsettling the drawings became. There were patterns, spirals, and what appeared to be depictions of monstrous faces, faces with empty eyes and twisted mouths. He felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just some random vandalism. This was something intentional, something ancient. As he steadied the floor, a gust of wind swept through the broken windows, blowing out his flashlight. The darkness felt suffocating. Langley scrambled to light a match, the flickering flame casting long shadows across the walls. And that's when he saw it. The hole. It wasn't large, but it was there, right in the center of the circle. A dark, yawning void in the stone, as though the ground had opened up to reveal something beneath. A low hum vibrated through the floor, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to make his skin crawl. He knelt closer to the hole, the hairs on his neck standing on end. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his curiosity, his drive to uncover the truth, kept him there. He reached out cautiously, his fingers brushing against the edge of the hole. Suddenly, the earth beneath him trembled. Langley recoiled, stumbling backward, the match falling from his hand and extinguishing in the dirt. In the dark, he heard it, something scraping, something clawing from deep within the earth. His pulse quickened, and he realized with dawning horror that the hole was not just a hole. It was a passage. A portal. The sound grew louder, and the temperature in the room dropped, freezing his breath. He could feel something rising from the depths. And then, in the faint light of his dying match, Langley saw the shape. It was too quick for him to fully comprehend, but it was enough. A massive, twisting form, shadowed and shifting, lurching upward from the hole, its claws scraping against the stone as it pulled itself free. Langley's heart slammed against his ribs as the air grew thick with an oppressive weight, the scent of sulfur and rot suffocating him. In a flash of insight, Langley realized what had happened. William Carter hadn't been possessed. He hadn't gone mad. He had uncovered the truth, just like Langley had. And in the process, he had awakened something that had been buried beneath Ashbrook for centuries. A demon. And worse, a hellmouth. The town had been built atop it, a place where the veil between worlds was thin, and the horrors from below could seep through, given the right push. The demon, freed from its prison, was coming for him. With one final, desperate glance at the hole, Langley turned and ran, his mind filled with the screams of the damned as the ground trembled beneath him. He stumbled out of the church, the rain still pouring, but this time, the water felt colder, darker. As he reached the edge of the town, he looked back. The church was gone, swallowed by the earth, leaving only an empty field behind. The storm raged on, and in the distance, Langley could hear the faint sound of something rising from the depths, calling out to him. There was no escaping it. Ashbrook was lost. And Langley knew that he would never leave the town alive.